If you start your vehicle and see the low washer fluid level warning in the instrument cluster display, it usually means the washer fluid level is too low in the reservoir. Pop the hood and refill the washer fluid. However, if the warning does not go away even after refilling the reservoir, there's a good chance the washer fluid level sensor is faulty. This sensor is mounted near the bottom of the washer reservoir, and its job is to detect when the fluid gets low. Over time, it can get clogged with dirt, causing a constant warning even when the tank is full. To fix this, you will have to clean or replace the sensor. It's not difficult, but it does require partially removing the wheel well fender liner to reach the reservoir. Start the engine and turn your steering wheel all the way to the left to give yourself more working space. Next, take a look inside the wheel well. You will have to remove these 4 clips from the fender liner and these 2 clips from the engine room undercover. You can use a clip removal tool or even a flathead screwdriver to pop out all 6 clips. Once the clips are out, carefully pull the fender liner to the side. Since it's made of flexible plastic, just grab the edge and gently bend it back. As soon as you move the fender liner out of the way, you will notice the washer fluid reservoir sitting right behind it. This is the fluid level sensor. The sensor is mounted close to the bottom of the tank, so it can accurately detect when the fluid level drops too low. You will also see a 2-wire electrical connector plugged into it. To unplug the connector from the sensor, press the tab on the side of the connector and pull it straight out. Before you remove the sensor, it's a good idea to test it with a multimeter to confirm whether it's faulty. This way you will know for sure if it needs replacement or if something else is causing the warning. On the sensor, you will see 2 small metal terminals inside where the connector plugs in. Set your multimeter to the continuity setting and touch 1 probe to each terminal. Now here's what you should expect. If the washer reservoir is full, a good sensor will show no continuity or OL, meaning the circuit is open. If the reservoir is empty, the sensor should show continuity, meaning the circuit is closed. If your multimeter shows continuity while the reservoir is still full, that means the sensor is stuck in the closed position and is faulty. On the other hand, if you never get continuity even when the reservoir is empty, the sensor is stuck open and also faulty. If your sensor fails the test, you must replace it. Or if you do not want to replace the sensor and just want the warning to go away in the instrument cluster, you can leave the sensor unplugged. When the sensor is disconnected, the system assumes everything is normal and will not show the warning. Just make sure to cover the connector properly to prevent corrosion. Now back to replacing the sensor. At first glance, it looks like the sensor should just slide straight out, but in reality, these sensors are held in tightly by rubber grommet to prevent leaks. I first tried pulling it by hand, gripping it firmly and wiggling it side to side, but it didn't budge. If the sensor feels stuck, don't worry, that's completely normal. The seal can get pretty snug over time. To make the job easier, I'm using a plastic trim removal tool. Just slip the tool carefully under the lip of the sensor and pry it outward. Work slowly and apply steady pressure instead of forcing it all at once, so you don't crack the reservoir or the sensor. And it's finally free. As soon as the sensor comes out, washer fluid will immediately begin leaking from the opening since the sensor sits at the bottom of the reservoir. The amount of fluid that drains will depend on how full your tank is. You can place a container under the tank if you want to avoid a mess. But for that you will have to remove the engine room undercover, and that requires lifting the vehicle on jack stands. I prefer cleaning a little washer fluid on the floor over doing that. With the sensor removed, we can get a clear look at it. The body of the sensor is a small plastic housing with an electrical connector on one side, and on the end that sits inside the reservoir, you will notice a plastic cylindrical shaped float. This float is what makes the sensor work. It's designed to rise and fall with the washer fluid level inside the tank. When the reservoir is full, the float stays up, keeping the circuit open. But as the fluid drops, the float moves down, which closes the circuit and triggers the low washer fluid warning in your instrument cluster. Over time, dirt, sludge, or even washer fluid additives can cause this float to get stuck. If the float can't move freely, the sensor may constantly read low even when the reservoir is full. If the float is gummed up, it's usually best to replace the sensor instead of reusing it. With the sensor out, we can now test it using a multimeter. Set your multimeter to the continuity setting and place one probe on each of the two terminals of the sensor. Now watch the multimeter display as I move the float up and down. With the float in the raised position, just like when the reservoir is full, there is no continuity, the circuit is open. But as soon as I push the float down, simulating a low fluid level, the multimeter shows continuity right away. Moving the float back up breaks the circuit again, and the continuity disappears. This change back and forth confirms that the sensor is working properly. Now it's time to install the sensor back into the reservoir. But before doing that, take a look at the top of the sensor. You will see two small guide pins. Make sure these pins are facing upward when you insert the sensor, because that's the correct orientation for it to sit properly in the tank. Line up the sensor with the opening, then press it straight in. Push firmly until you feel it seat all the way against the reservoir. The rubber grommet around the sensor will create a tight seal to prevent leaks. Once it's seated, plug the electrical connector back in. Once the sensor is installed, go ahead and refill the washer fluid reservoir. Start the engine and the low washer fluid warning on the instrument cluster should now be gone. With the reservoir full, take a moment to check for any leaks around the area where the sensor was installed. If you see washer fluid dripping out, the sensor may not be seated properly, or the rubber seal might be damaged. Remove and reseat the sensor if needed. Once the sensor is replaced, reinstall the fender liner. Push the fender liner back into place so it sits neatly against the edge. Then reinstall the clips you removed earlier, pressing them in firmly until they lock into place. And that's how you test and replace a washer fluid level sensor in a 4th generation Kia Sportage. If you found this video helpful, give it a like and subscribe to EasyJoin for more DIY car maintenance videos. Thanks for watching.